ChatGPT is the antithesis of open source AI. Even though it's called open AI, it's not, it's closed because it's a giant model living on their servers that you have no ownership.
You're using renewable energy for all of your operation. So maybe tell us a little bit more on how we can advance the use of renewable energy that we have been talking for decades. Financial Fox is proud to partner with Hive Digital Technologies, a public listed company focusing on building the green energy infrastructure for the AI revolution. Hive was the first crypto miner to go public in Canada in 2017. They are also listed on Nasdaq and the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. They hodl, and they are a leader in efficient Bitcoin mining with the best hash rate realization in the industry. Their operation powered by green energy, hydropower in Sweden and Canada, and geothermal in Ireland. Hive was also the first crypto miner to buy GPUs, chips, and have an AI strategy. And that's very exciting considering the AI data center are such a high profitable business. Finally, and most importantly, Hive care about shareholders. That's why their strategy is low dilution, low G&A, and focus on cash flow. If you don't know Hive, check them out at hivedigitaltechnology.com and follow them on social media. Remember, AI is the future and Bitcoin is rising as a new asset class. Some analysts have a target price above $100,000 for 2024, but let's see. For now, we hodl, and don't forget to check out Hive. More information in the description. Today I have something for our investor watching the Financial Fox, and it's actually a deep dive on data center and AI infrastructure stocks, which investment bank Goldman Sachs said they are poised to be the next phase of investment. Obviously, today we live in a digital age and we need a resilient and strong infrastructure that can power the AI revolution that we are experiencing. So today on the show, for this deep dive into data center and the race to AI compute, I have Aydin Kilic, CEO of Hive Digital Technologies. Before we get into the show, couple of important things. All the content on the Financial Fox is for informational purposes only. We don't give any financial advice, so any decision you make sure that you do your own research. Second, I know that many of you are watching our interviews, but you are not part of our community. So I'm gonna ask you today to click the subscribe button on YouTube and become part of us, and also follow us on social media to stay up to date, not only with our news and interviews, but also to give us feedback and comment. I'm trying to bring interesting guests that can add value to you as an investor, as a trader, as a professional working in this emerging technology space, or in finance, or even as a beginner that want to learn everything about blockchain and AI. This is the podcast for you, so subscribe. Aydin, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Hey, it's great to be here. I am excited about Bitcoin Nashville next week, and we've been doing a lot of cool things at Hive, so happy to catch up and share some news.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm also excited as well. I think obviously it is the biggest event in crypto, and we have got also Trump coming to speak. So really excited to see, what's happened. So listen, I want to start with some kind of introduction, because you recently published your final results. So I thought maybe you could give us some highlights of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a stellar year. We produced over 3,100 Bitcoin. We did an adjusted EBITDA of 37 million for the year. And our AI business hit an annual run rate revenue of just over 7 million for Q4. And I think that's worth noting, because when we started that process last year, early 2023, we hit an annual run rate revenue of 1 million. And so we grew that over 7x. In the first year doing it. So I think it was really exciting. We navigated a halving event as well. So there's been so much happening in the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously over the last, I think a few months, Bitcoin miners has become, I say, quite popular. You know, everybody is talking about AI, and you see, Hive is still the kind of like the new kid on the block, and you know, I think people still need to kind of like realize. You know the value that you are actually bringing, and how are you managing the company in a way that is really efficient and looking to maximize shareholder value. So I think we need to talk more about Hive. That's why you are on the show, and you are going to multiple events. So you know, let's kind of get to know people, what Hive is doing. So one of the things that I really wanted to break down, and I don't think many are talking about, because you know, like all this conversation about Bitcoin miners moving to AI, it all looks like it's a round table discussion between just the people you know, the people that are in the know. And you know, when you kind of like, I talk to investor, and you know, I say, well, crypto miners now are becoming really a big part of this new infrastructure that you know, has to support the AI revolution. We saw, I mean, even recently with the you know, there was a big tech failure, and you know, like lots of things were down. There has been problem with airline and everything. We see that we have got really an infrastructure that doesn't you know, support all the, you know, everything that we need. So that's a lot to say. I want to kind of break down to some concept. So lots of investors might be not familiar with crypto, and they are wondering why crypto miners now they are entering the AI space, and what is their contribution to the space. So please unpack that for us.
Well, I think that you touched on a lot of things. You mentioned the infrastructure. You know, the Bitcoin network has now been running for 15 years globally, and it's just progressively grown, and it's incredibly secure, right? So I think it's always good to reflect on how far we've come as an industry just in terms of Bitcoin. And moreover, there's the infrastructure component, proof of work, which obviously is a miner. We're staunch supporters of that whole consensus mechanism. I believe Bitcoin is the world's decentralized energy-backed currency. Energy is what gives it value. You can denominate the value, or at least the cost to mine a Bitcoin, in joules of energy, right? And depending on what you pay for that energy, dollars. So it's, as we all well know, you know, this is not something that is just printed magically by a central bank. It is all governed by, you know, the fundamentals in the Bitcoin white paper. That's the proof of work part. In the last few years, we've also seen advances on the layer 2 components, you know, with Lightning, and I guess we had ruins and ordinals. So there's been so many intelligent, wonderful contributors to the Bitcoin ecosystem that have allowed it to flourish as a technology. And, you know, we've seen exploits on all these, you know, cross-chain proof of stake, you know, when we're not into that at all. Like, we're proof of workers at Hive. So I think Bitcoin's demonstrated incredible resilience. Now you have Trump supporting it, which is amazing, because as he said, he's going to be there. What I understand, there's confirmation, even despite the assassination attempt, he's still going to be at Bitcoin Nashville, which is incredible. So I think that the Bitcoin ecosystem in and of itself is still showing a lot of growth and resilience. That word keeps coming up for me. I went to Bitcoin Asia. It's also put on by Bitcoin Magazine. Very well attended. It was in Hong Kong. And, you know, I got to learn a little bit more that they've got an ETF there, right, that is approved on the Hang Seng. So I think as, you know, El Salvador's adopted it as a currency. So I think as, you know, more ETFs pop up around the world, maybe there's more volume on those ETFs, more countries might, you know, adopt Bitcoin as a form of currency, especially ones that fight hyperinflation. I think there's just so much happening there. I know you're asking about AI, and I think the common bedrock that people often allude to is that you have data centers and power, right? So basically in Bitcoin, you know, we have ASIC miners we install on a rack, and each ASIC miner is rated in joules per terahash. So this miner needs this many joules of energy to produce this much hash rate. And then the hash rate is linear correlated to how much Bitcoin you earn. In AI, what happens is you run GPU servers. And why GPU servers? So I'm going to provide a little bit of a deep dive, which I think would hopefully be very helpful for your viewers. So we used to mine Ethereum, right? And in fact, we were one of the world's largest Ethereum miners. 120,000 GPUs at our facility in northern Sweden. So mining Ethereum, you run the get hash algorithm, and so the GPUs were adept at that. Later on, there were some Ethereum mining ASICs that kind of came out, but broadly, Ethereum mining was done with GPUs. However, Ethereum mining, when it was done with GPUs, didn't really need powerful servers. Usually, you would populate your GPUs in a very rudimentary server we call rigs, right? So basic, CPU with an operating system, motherboard, etc. But when you're doing AI, the server itself has to be enterprise grade, right? So when we started pivoting at Hive, our GPUs, which were still NVIDIA GPUs, by the way, but when we pivoted those NVIDIA GPUs into doing AI compute, we had to upgrade the server that the GPUs operated in. And so we partnered with Supermicro. And so when you say, well, what is a server? Just think of a really powerful home computer. You have CPUs, RAM on the motherboard, storage. And so now you have a really powerful computer with a bunch of GPUs installed. And moreover, with the latest generation of NVIDIA architecture, the H100 and now coming out with the H200 later this year, and of course the B100, which is called the Blackwell architecture next year, really what has emerged is the speed at which a cluster of GPUs can talk together is of paramount importance to move all this information very quickly. So what I mean is, on a H100, there's 8 GPUs and you have 8-way interconnects, so each GPU can talk to each other incredibly fast. They call that the SXM connector. And then 8 GPUs are in one server. Then you need to have the servers talk to each other incredibly quickly, and they communicate over what's called InfiniBand. So NVIDIA purchased a company called Mellanox a few years ago, so they had bespoke, very high-speed interconnects between the different servers. And so this is emerging as another fundamental component of AI compute. So to recap, for AI compute, you have your GPUs, you have the servers that they run in, and then the InfiniBand, which ties it all together, which we call the fabric. And why is this so important? The reason why it's important is because you need to have a lot of memory. So these GPUs, for example, when we think of an ASIC miner in Bitcoin, you go terahash. Well, in AI world, right, you could actually look at the rating of an H100 and you can look at its teraflops, okay? Teraflop. What is a teraflop? A flop is a floating point operation. So it's a single mathematical operation. And what is a tera? Tera is just 10 to the 12. It's a trillion, right? So terahash is a trillion hashes. Teraflop is a trillion flops. And so what does that mean, right? So it sounds kind of funny, but what does it really mean? So when you are running an inference on a model, right, a large language model, right? ChatGPT is the biggest example, but the open source world is really interested in developing models that don't live on someone else's server, that you can run on your own server. That's where these models developed by, of all companies, Meta has been an incredible contributor to open source AI, where you can take their model, install it on your server. That model doesn't need to connect to any of Meta's servers. It lives on your GPU server. It's called open source. And Llama, which now they had Llama 1, now there's Llama 2 and Llama 3. These models are maybe 7 billion in parameter size, 13 billion in parameter size. They even have one that's 80 billion in parameter size. So these models have been trained, and they have 80 billion parameters or 14 billion parameters of data, and it just explains almost how many neurons are in this model. Think of it like a brain. So when you want to run AI, what you're doing is you're loading this model onto a GPU server, and that GPU needs to have enough memory for the entire model to fit on it, or at least a server does. And if the model is really big, we could get really technical, but there's things called data parallelism and tensor parallelism, where basically you can split up a model across different GPUs and nodes. But the point of getting back to the explanation on teraflops is that you actually can count and calculate the number of flops that you need to run an inference, right? Based on the number of tokens. And by the way, tokens is a very important concept in AI. Tokens are like hashes. That's kind of what an AI model understands, right? A token is almost like a syllable of a word. On average, there's like every word in the English language is about 1.3 tokens. And when you ask ChatGPT, can you explain a diet for, men who, if they want to build muscle, and it will, come back and say, oh, you should get, 2 grams of protein per pound and exercise 3 times a week, whatever. What it's doing is really, it doesn't actually know what your fitness is. It breaks down your prompt, right? Your prompt, describe a diet for men to build muscle into tokens, right? It's just data. So it splits that sentence up into these tokens. And then what it does is it runs those tokens as an array of data through the neural network, which is all of these parameters, if you will, of this model. So as you pass an array of data through this neural network, what's happening is a whole bunch of mathematical operations, which we call matrix multiplication, or they basically do a dot product. And so what it's doing is it's finding similarity between the tokens that you are asking it and everything that it's been trained on, and it reconstitutes like, oh, okay, we using this logic and this neural network, we believe this is what this person wants to know, and then it will reconstitute an answer, right? So that's really what's happening. So I know that was a lot, but people could rewind it and play it back. Like I actually want to educate people. We know what we're doing at Hive, right? Like we're not just kind of like, hey, we're doing AI, it's cool, right? Like we're actually like, we're doing a ton of R&D, we're cash flowing on it. This is how it works. This is, I think what sets us apart. And it's super exciting, right? Because you're seeing now that these models are getting smarter and smarter. What's happening at the cutting edge is that open source researchers are trying to get models smaller and smaller and smaller. So they don't need to fit, like you don't need to have this mega 1.8 trillion. So by the way, ChatGPT 4 is 1.8 trillion parameters, right? And what's happened, that's part 4. ChatGPT 1 came out in 2018 or 2019. Wasn't that smart, right? I think it was 100 million parameters. And so it's grown, orders of magnitude, hundreds of millions to billions, hundreds of billions, and now in the trillions. And so what the approach they've taken is just this juggernaut approach. We're just like, okay, we're going to keep training these massive models on clusters of 1,000 GPUs, but it needs so much resources. And researchers are just like, well, we don't need a model that knows about Cinderella and soup recipes and diet. If you're going to have a model that's going to be used for an enterprise use, maybe you're a mining company, right? Maybe you're, a law firm. You have a very specific body of information, so you could train a much smaller model on your own specific data. Say you're a law firm and you have hundreds of or thousands and thousands of pages of case law, etc. Tokenize that, train it on an open source model, which you can have on your own server, so it's not owned by ChatGPT, and that is the future of open source AI, right? So I think that it's very early right now. I think the future is to have large language models be able to fit on a phone. Because when you think about computers, right, IBM, when they did their first computer in whatever, the 60s, their total addressable global market was 5. 5 computers. There's only 5. I think mostly governments and military could afford to buy it, and even you had to use it, right? And now, this iPhone is more powerful than IBM's mainframe from the 60s, and it fits in your pocket. So what's happening is, I think large language models, the direction the open source community is going is, can we shrink the models so you can have more models everywhere distributed? And that is the future that maybe they can eventually run on your phone. Because what I mean by that is, for ChatGPT, there's no magic. When you're using ChatGPT, there's no magic happening on your computer. It's just a web prompt. All the data is going to their server farm, wherever it is, probably in California, right? Everything that you're prompting it is staying on that server, the inputs, the outputs, and all of that stuff. So it's kind of like uploading your photos to Facebook back in the day, right? You think, oh, I'm going to upload my photo to Facebook and I'm going to delete the photo and they're not going to have my photo. They still have your photo, so it's fine if you're just asking about Cinderella, but if you're a business and you want to actually do something unique, you're probably not going to want to use something like ChatGPT, which, by the way, and I'll turn it back to you, I know there's a lot of information. ChatGPT is the antithesis of open source AI. Even though it's called OpenAI, it's not. It's closed because it's a giant model living on their servers that you have no ownership of, you have no agency with. That's
it's so important to make those points and just highlight the difference, because I think either you are an expert, but if you're not, you kind of put all together. So lots of information, that's great. Let's take a quick step back. So Hive is building data center, and you have got Bitcoin data center, you have got AI data centers. Can you maybe just tell us some of the difference? I believe there will be some technical requirements, some specific power requirements, or also when it comes down to investment as well, maybe capital expenditure. So if you can kind of highlight some difference, I think that would be interesting. And also on the revenue side as well, I believe the AI data center are going to be much more profitable than the Bitcoin data center.
Yeah, all great questions. So basically, our AI data centers for Hive, for example, right now, they run in what we call tier 3 data centers. They have 99.8% uptime, right? And they are in Montreal, in Sweden, in Stockholm. Our crypto mines physically different facilities, like hours away, like just completely separate buildings, like hours away. And so like Dave Perel, who's on our board of directors, he coined this term tier zero. So like a crypto mine is like a tier zero, right? So you don't really have redundancy. It's all about efficiency, put up your racks, install as many miners as you can per megawatt. Maybe you have fans, maybe you don't. It's passively cooled. You don't have redundancy. You don't have air conditioning and all these fancy things in a crypto mine. A crypto mine's rugged. Frank Holmes, our chairman, he likes to say crypto mine's like an F-150, and a tier 3 data center is like a Ferrari. It's a lot more refined and higher performance, etc. So that's just kind of qualitatively the difference. Now, in terms of cost and economics, you could build a crypto mine for 500 grand a megawatt, right? But a tier 3 data center is usually about 10 million a megawatt, right? So it's like 20x the capex. But conversely, the revenue is quite different. The difference, for example, is depending whether you rent your H100s on demand or in a fixed term contract, you could be getting anywhere from $2 to $4 a kilowatt hour. I'm using round numbers here to keep it simple. $2 to $4 per kilowatt hour on the revenue side. Okay. Now on the crypto mining side, like right now, an S21 is maybe doing a little over 10 cents a kilowatt hour. I mean, we're post halving, it's mining economics are bearish, but even if Bitcoin price doubled overnight and difficulty didn't change, you're doing 20 cents a kilowatt hour with an S21. That's still 1/10 to 1/20th of what you're earning, right? 10 to 20 cents for crypto mining versus $2 to $4 for AI compute with H100. So it's way more profit dense. And so when you just kind of think of that multiple, it's easy to say it's over 10x, right? So for example, Frank likes to say you have 100 megawatts of crypto mining, you get 100 million of revenue. You could get 100 million of revenue from 10 megawatts of compute in AI, right? Now, people may counter that and they go, oh, but it costs more to run a tier 3 data center. It's like, yeah, okay, 25, maybe 30 cents a kilowatt hour, whatever it is. But if you're doing $2 of revenue, go on the low and be conservative, $2, and your cost is 25 cents, that means your profit margin is $1.75 a kilowatt hour, right? Crypto mining, if it's 10 cents revenue and your all-in cost is a nickel, well, your gross mining margin is still only 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So now on a per kilowatt basis, the profit of $1.75 relative to 5 cents, even crazier multiple, right? So I think that's like 35x. That's why there's this huge gold rush, but the execution is different, right? Like you're building, that's why the Ferrari F-150 thing is a good, as an Italian, I'm half Italian, you're Italian, like, you look at tailoring, like a pair of jeans or, a beautiful gown or a fine suit. Like it's one is rugged, one is refined. And so I think that a lot of crypto miners are trying to rush into the space and people are just talking about power. So hey, we have like 1.1 gigawatts of power in the pipeline. It's just like, what does that mean? So this is like, you have moose pasture with like a transmission line like 6 miles away. Like, do you know how long it's going to take to build that into a tier 3 data? Nobody cares. It was just like, but we need power though, right? And it's like, yes, that's one thing, but like there's a lot of execution. And by the way, have you ever even done this before? It's sort of like, you're watching the NBA and you used to play basketball with your buddies at high school. You're like, well, it looks pretty easy. I could totally do that. Maybe, but see how it goes.
It's such an important point because people just talk about numbers, but then it comes down to execution and actually what's the strategy that you have in place to monetize this AI compute, right? How are you going to sell the power, So I'm asking you as a CEO of Hive, what's your strategy?
So our strategy to date has been to have a B2B strategy where we worked with, we were at 2 marketplaces, now we're up to 4. We'll be at 6 this quarter. And each marketplace, it's a front end, right? It's a UX where end users can go on, log in, and it's basically like a drop-down menu. It's like, hey, you know what, I don't want to rent a A100, I want to rent an A40. Oh, they have one in Montreal, they have one in Stockholm, whatever. And by the way, the reason why I explain all that stuff about servers is because like if you ever did go on one of these platforms, you're like, oh wait, like this server has, more system RAM than that one. This one has more direct storage. It's actually like, as Frank likes to say, ordering from a fast food menu, there's like a lot of different options. And so the server, not just a GPU, but the server, the bedrock is very important as well. You go on there, you pick the server you want to have the storage, compute requirements, etc. that you need, and then you're rocking, right? So that's the approach that we took, and that's how all our revenues to date come through that method. And it was great for us to focus on infrastructure as a service and not have to focus on sales and branding and all that stuff. That's what the marketplaces do. The front end of that marketplace, users through an SSH will basically get root access into the server, and then it's theirs, and they're paying for hours, days, or weeks, what have you. I think the future is partnering with larger enterprises that want to rent a cluster of 256, 512, 1024 GPUs for 3 months, 6 months. You get a lower hourly rate, but then it's just kind of fixed, right? So I think that's the future. And also, like, there's some researchers we've been talking to that want to train foundational models on our compute. So we've got a lot of cool R&D stuff happening as well. But I think the future is finding larger contracts with enterprises where you're renting a large array of GPUs for a fixed period of time.
Wow, super interesting. One of the aspects that I wanted to touch, I know that you are quite tight with time, very busy before Nashville, is also about the energy that is going to power these AI infrastructure. I mean, Goldman Sachs has been talking about data center power demand to grow 160% by 2030. I mean, this is like massive numbers, and obviously renewable energy are going to play a big role in that. You are doing a lot of, you are using renewable energy for most, I think, all of your operation. So maybe tell us a little bit more on how we can advance the use of renewable energy that we have been talking for decades, but we are also going back all the time. We go back to oil, we go back, to energy that is not so green. So we need to kind of like prioritize green energy, and would be interesting to hear how are you doing at Hive, and also what else can be done to actually advance renewable energy to be useful for strengthening our infrastructure.
That's a great question. I think it's something I hadn't addressed in our introduction, but Hive is green energy focused with hydro and geothermal electricity in Sweden, Canada, and Iceland. Of course, we like those jurisdictions for the cool, dry climate as well. But right now we're running a little over 5 exahash, which is almost 1% of the network. I mean, that's a lot. Like we're making almost 4 Bitcoin a day post halving. But compared to our peers, there's companies doing 10 exahash, 20 exahash, what have you. So the industry has rapidly pursued scale, and so I think what's worth noting, especially for your viewers that are more keen on the investing side, we're dramatically undervalued now. I mean, you could look at our earnings webcast go to our YouTube. It's the videos there. If you go to my section at the end, Frank talks about this as well in his section. Anthony Powers covered it. We ran our own independent analysis. If you look at our enterprise value to EBITDA, we're trading at a 3x multiple. Our peers are trading at 5, 10, 15, 20, even 30x multiple to their EBITDA. It's crazy. And I'm talking annualized Q4 EBITDA. So, I think there's a couple things happening. One, the market is rewarding scale. But to your point about energy, these guys don't care about green energy or not. You know what I mean? Like, it's just scale. Can I just get this massive contract in ERCOT, do an interconnect? Oh, it's kind of renewable, like for 30% of the time, But like, we looked at a lot of those opportunities, and we were just like, okay, well, if you're using grid mix and there's like coal and gas in there for 60% of the time, is it really green energy? And so it almost becomes a philosophical discussion, but we do believe in all the Bitcoin we mine on our balance sheets with green and clean energy. So it's virgin green Bitcoin, as Frank likes to call it, which hopefully one day, I mean, with the whole ESG boom in the last couple of years, you'd think that would catch on. But look, it's part of our core values and our company vision to use green energy. And so I think how can green energy be furthered? I think it's very conducive to powering data centers, because data centers can be remote, right? As long as you've got like the right fiber and network connectivity. I think it's on governments that want to embrace it and realize data centers are the future. I mean, everything nowadays relies on data centers, because we're in the information age, right? Like, data is the new most valuable commodity. And so I think governments, municipalities, etc., that are willing to allocate resources, and maybe they have to invest more in power generation for that purpose, and realize that abundant, cheap energy will allow any society to flourish, right? Because you can use it for manufacturing, you can use it for advancement of technology. In this case, it's just, whether you're talking Bitcoin or AI compute, abundant, cheap energy is so, I mean, people just take for granted their cell phones, like how much data. You know, I went to go to the store the other day to get my phone looked at, and they're like, hey, you want us to upgrade your plan? I had 15 gigabytes. For the same price, they're like, yeah, we could give you 200 gigabytes. It's like, wow, that's crazy. 200 gigabytes in a monthly plan. I used to be an RF engineer, right? So like, I know exactly how a cell phone works. So, you know, yeah, there's a transceiver on here and the data gets sent. But when it hits the base station and you've got information that's going all across the world, it's all being routed through data centers, right? So I think that it really falls on governments that will embrace this fourth industrial revolution, as they call it, you know?
Yeah, hopefully they are going to be more positive when it comes to regulation, because that's really the key aspect. I'm really glad that you mentioned a couple of points about data, right? And data as a way to kind of evaluate companies and evaluate miners. So I would suggest any investor watching to go to the MinerMag. That is really a great publication where you can get lots of information that allow you to assess who is the most efficient Bitcoin miner. So there are some interesting data that I learned myself, like the price to hash ratio or the Bitcoin hash rate realization. And those are things that you need to look when you are picking, you know, a company to invest. And I think not most people are actually looking at that. They more look like the big number, like you said at the beginning, you know, big contract, you know, lots of money, lots of powers. And then, you know, you go down and you actually should look at how efficient is an organization and the strategy they've got in place and what they're actually doing, the fact they are very attentive to green energy. So it's great that you came on the show to kind of share everything. Aydin, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and you always have very insightful questions. And I hope that your viewers, whether they want to learn about technology, you know, understand Hive's value proposition, how we're so undervalued relative to our peers, and just having solid fundamentals, you know, having a positive operating cash flow post, having 2,500 Bitcoin on the balance sheet, you know, our enterprise value. If you look at our market cap relative to how much Bitcoin we have, maybe we're 400 million US, and we have 160 million of Bitcoin on the balance sheet, right? So our enterprise value is a bargain compared to our peers, and I don't think we're getting any value for the AI side of the business. So it's going to be a super cool year ahead. If you see me at Bitcoin Nashville, come say hi. Hopefully these hats are usually a big hit. These gray ones, I really like the gray one, so this one's mine, but we have white ones and black ones and other colors. And make sure to drop by, and anyone wearing the, you know, cool shirt, yeah, just, you know, reach out, and we're friendly. We love we love anyone interested in crypto, and anyone interested in learning more.